got half the department in my backyard, and someone just called 911 on us," Jake muttered, staring at the red and blue lights flickering through the trees. Officers in polos froze mid-burger. Someone dropped a deviled egg. Across the street, Karen Y., hero of president, suburban warlord, wine glass raised. Watched like she had just foiled a domestic terror plot. Her emergency? A housewarming party. Her target, the actual police chief. Welcome to Holy Land, where logic goes to die and clipboards rule the streets. Eli Ramirez had spent 25 years talking people down from ledges, de-escalating armed standoffs, and commanding precincts with the calm of a man who'd seen everything. So naturally, retirement terrified him. That's why 3 months after trading his badge for a mailbox key, he and his wife, Dana, moved into a quaint 2-story home in Willow Creek, suburbia. The suburbia's version of Valhalla. White fences, weekly newsletters. The kind of neighborhood where dogs wear sweaters and the trash cans have designated parking spots. It was supposed to be peace. To mark their new chapter, Eli threw a modest housewarming party. Just family, some former colleagues from the department, and a grill Dana swore was overkill for burgers. No uniforms, no sirens. Just cold drinks, paper lanterns strung along the fence, and stories of dumb criminals swapped between people who'd spent decades catching them. A couple of the younger officers still had badge clips on their belts, and someone left a scanner radio chirping on the patio table, but no one cared. It was laughter and lemonade and absolutely nothing illegal. Until apparently it was. Across the street, from behind her manicured rose bushes and ironic live, laugh, love sign, HOA President Karen D. Wilkins stood watch. She had been welcoming the Ramirezes since their moving truck arrived, pointing out unauthorized lawn gnomes and offering laminated copies of the community's visual compliance standards. She hadn't liked the paper lanterns, or the playlist, or the number of guests, which she estimated with the dead seriousness of someone spotting a counterfeit coupon in a grocery line. She'd even slid a typed note under their door the day before, titled Floral Plants and Perimeter Protocols, criticizing Dana's choice of flower pots. It was weirdly specific and formatted like a court summons. So when she saw 2 guests fist-bumping in tactical boots, Karen made the call. At precisely 7:43 p.m., the music paused mid-chorus of an ADS throwback. 2 police cruisers pulled up to Eli's curb with lights blazing. For a moment, everyone assumed it was a prank, until officers stepped out, hands near holsters, eyes scanning the yard. "Dispatch received reports of impersonators, possibly armed," one rookie said stiffly. Eli blinked. "You got to be kidding me," he muttered. The same voice he once used to defuse a hostage situation now sounded like a dad trying to explain TikTok. Dana, holding a tray of deviled eggs, whispered, "Is this about the potato salad?" Eli stepped forward, pulled out his wallet, and held up his retired badge with practiced ease. "Name's Ramirez. Used to be your lieutenant's boss, and unless grilling hot dogs in sandals is a felony now, I suggest you holster whatever this is." One officer recognized him immediately and froze. The other glanced toward the house, then toward Karen, who was now standing on her porch, glass of rosé in hand, smiling like she'd just caught a serial killer. From across the street, Karen raised her wine glass in a slow, deliberate toast. Eli squinted. Was she seriously smirking? The cops had come to his housewarming because the HOA president called them in on her own neighborhood's former police chief? And that was when Eli realized this woman might be more dangerous than any perp he ever booked. If you've never seen a dozen cops holding barbecue plates freeze mid-bite while someone yells, "Hands where I can see them," you're missing out on a very specific kind of American theater. Eli hadn't moved yet. He stood by the grill, tongs still in hand, the scent of smoked ribs thick in the air, as 2 patrol cars flared red and blue across his driveway. It wasn't until the younger officer barked out, "Show us your hands," that silence fell over the yard like a dropped curtain. Dana stared. Officer Tomes dropped a corn on the cob. And next to the folding table, a retired canine handler casually lifted both hands, still gripping a beer. Across the street, Karen didn't budge. She sipped her wine and observed with the smugness of someone live streaming an HOA coup. Her call had been precise. Suspicious gathering, men in tactical boots, possibly impersonating law enforcement, armed. I believe there's a plan to undermine community order. The dispatcher took her seriously. because even the word impersonator rings bells after dark. So now, two rookies from Precinct 9, still fresh enough to ask how to pronounce Miranda, had stumbled into a party full of actual off-duty and retired officers and were seconds away from pulling a full tactical move on their own brass. Eli didn't flinch. He slowly set down the tongs, raised his hands, and with the ease of someone who'd walked through far worse, said, "Gentlemen, my name is Eli Ramirez, retired Deputy Chief, City of Masonville, badge 972R. This is my home. These are my friends. And that," he added, pointing toward the grill, "is a pork shoulder that's been cooking for 6 hours, so if anyone shoots it, we're going to have a real situation." Officer Bennett blinked. Officer Juno looked pale, a pause stretched between them like a held breath, until Dana leaned over and whispered to Eli, "Maybe we should have just ordered pizza." One of the rookies, Juno, judging by the nameplate, finally found his voice. "Sir, is this the police chief's birthday party or something?" Eli gave him a long, dry look. "Do I look like I'm wearing a party hat?" There was an audible laugh from behind the cooler. Someone muttered, "Bet Karen's already drafted the HOA citation." Tension drained as fast as it had risen. Officers lowered their hands. Relief washed over the backyard like a sprinkler on a summer day. But Eli's eyes hadn't left Karen. She was still standing there, perfectly posed as if she were watching the final scene of a courtroom drama she'd directed. When their eyes met, she nodded. Not apologetically, but like a monarch acknowledging a peasant's plea. Eli didn't smile. He'd seen that look before. Entitlement cloaked in concerned citizen. The difference was, this time, it wasn't just a nuisance. Her call hadn't just embarrassed him, it had weaponized panic. Back in the kitchen, Dana started cleaning up while whispering to their neighbor, "This isn't over. She thinks she's the sheriff around here." Eli stayed outside, watching the cruisers back out slowly, the officers muttering apologies and radioing dispatch to cancel backup. The food had gone cold, but the mood had shifted from celebration to suspicion, and standing there in the soft glow of paper lanterns, Eli knew what came next. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was war. And as he picked up his old badge from the patio table, a thought crept into Eli's mind like a whisper. If she's willing to call in the cavalry over potato salad and folding chairs, what else is she capable of? Eli had dealt with power-hungry types before, politicians, precinct egos, even a judge who once tried to ticket a tow truck for parking aggressively. But Karen Wilkins wasn't just another overbearing neighbor. No, Karen was something rarer, more potent. She had infrastructure. Her weapon wasn't a gun, a badge, or a title from the city. It was a clipboard, a printer, and the unchecked authority of someone who'd memorized the HOA bylaws like they were scripture. Long before the BBQ incident, Karen had already made herself known. Her first contact with the Ramarises came in the form of a manila envelope tucked neatly under their welcome mat, labeled Notice of Lawn Nonconformity, Article 4C. According to her typed letter, in 12-point Times New Roman, bolded, their front yard showed inconsistent grass height, particularly near the eastern border, where a deviation of 0.7 inches was visible to the naked eye. A week later came a warning about their mailbox posts, painted a shade of brown that did not match the HOA-approved wood tones on file. Then, 2 days after that, another note. Your vehicle is parked at an unapproved angle, suggesting erratic behavior or disregard for uniformity. Eli had thought it was a joke at first. He even laughed when Dana showed him the warning about their dog wagging too energetically near the property line. Apparently, Buddy's tail velocity could cause shrub damage, she'd said, reading it aloud while chewing toast. But as the stack of letters grew, the humor evaporated. Karen wasn't playing, she was documenting. Then came the pattern. Neighbors started to share similar tales. One man got fined for using festive lights in April, outside the designated sparkle season. A single mom down the street had received a notice about improperly stacked recycling bins. And Karen? She always cited the same clause, numbers, the same section codes, and closed every note with in service of community excellence, K. Wilkins, HOA president. Eli went digging. What he found wasn't just pettiness. It was a spreadsheet of control. Over the past year, Karen had filed 17 internal neighborhood security alerts, all directed to the city's non-emergency line, and in 5 cases, 911. She once reported a teenager delivering DoorDash as a casing suspect and flagged a 10-year-old's lemonade stand as an unlicensed commercial booth. She even snapped photos of a neighbor trimming hedges shirtless and titled the complaint, "Public Indecency via Landscaping." She's not just a nuisance, Eli muttered one night, staring at the growing folder of HOA letters spread across his dining table. She's running a one-woman surveillance state. Dana nodded, sipping her tea. She's the kind of person who wakes up offended, and we just moved into her favorite playground. Outside, as if summoned by their thoughts, Karen was out front again, this time planting a new yard sign, one Eli could see clearly through the window. "This is a neighborhood, not a nightclub." Eli raised an eyebrow. Is she talking about our Spotify playlist?" "No," Dana said dryly. "I think she's declaring war on rhythm." The next morning, Eli received a letter folded perfectly into thirds, no envelope, just taped to the front door like a parking citation. It read, "Failure to acknowledge behavioral warnings may result in formal HOA escalation procedures." He stared at it for a long moment, then muttered, "Escalation? Lady, you haven't seen escalation yet." Eli didn't respond to Karen's taped warning right away. He didn't need to, because while she was busy declaring war via Helvetica font and laminated citations, he was forming something far more dangerous than a complaint letter, a coalition. That week, over backyard coffee and a shared distaste for HOA tyranny, he looped in 2 allies. Paige Lattimore, a civil rights attorney who lived 3 houses down, and Caleb Mendez, a municipal compliance officer who moonlighted as the unofficial fixer for all things bureaucratically suspicious. "You're telling me she cited you for festive lights and threatening shrubbery?" Paige asked, flipping through Eli's growing binder of violations. "What's next? Unauthorized breathing during HOA-approved hours?" "She called my hose a tripping hazard," Caleb added. "It was coiled neatly on a rack." They met by Eli's fire pit that evening, documents spread across a picnic table like a crime scene. By flashlight and s'more smoke, the plan took shape. They would investigate Karen, not just her letters, but the way she wielded power through the HOA. Caleb offered to pull budget summaries from city records. Paige had a friend in the legal office who could cross-check public complaints. Eli, he still had contacts who could retrieve public incident reports filed from Willow Creek within the past 18 months. By the following Thursday, Caleb came back pale and holding a printout. "Look at line item 47, he said. HOA expenditure, community aesthetic upgrade, zone 3, $3,800, 0 cents. Guess what zone 3 is?" Eli scanned the street map. That's her backyard. And this one, line 62, patio enhancement, shared recreation area, $5,600, 0 cents. "Let me guess," Paige said. "The community jacuzzi?" "Our jacuzzi. Stalled last March, no vote, no community notification. But guess who submitted the invoice?" Caleb flipped the page. "K. Wilkins and Associates, Landscaping, LLC. Eli looked up. "She's got a company?" "No, her nephew does." The pile grew fast. Fences marked as privacy barriers, outdoor lighting billed as safety enhancements, mulch deliveries for seasonal beautification that only ever arrived at one address, Karen's. But the real break came when Eli knocked on the door of Marvin Tills, the former HOA treasurer who'd moved to a quieter part of town after what neighbors called a disagreement with Karen. Marvin was a wiry man with the permanent expression of someone who never got back the deposit on his soul. Still, when Eli explained what was happening, Marvin exhaled like he'd been waiting years for someone to ask. "I kept a backup," Marvin said, leading Eli to a drawer. He handed over an old USB flash drive, labeled in Sharpie, "Before the Queen." That night around the fire pit again, Eli plugged it into his laptop. The folder structure was basic but damning. Spreadsheets, voting logs, budget trails, 14 transactions over $32,000, 0 cents in funds, diverted without recorded votes. The timestamps were consistent, the digital signatures missing. And in one email chain, Marvin had tried to raise concerns, only to be met with a reply from Karen: "As acting board president, I'm authorized to fast-track minor beautification efforts." We don't need to burden the community with every detail. Paige sat back. She buried the audit before it even started. Worse, Caleb added, she pushed Marvin out 2 weeks later and rewrote the bylaws. Eli stared at the screen, the flickering fire reflecting off his glasses. She's not just enforcing the rules, she is the rules. He closed the laptop and looked toward Karen's darkened house. But every ruler forgets one thing, he said quietly. Crowns don't survive sunlight. And tomorrow, he planned to start pulling back the curtains. By the next week, Karen's grip on the neighborhood wasn't loosening. It was convulsing. Her response to Eli's quiet investigation wasn't subtle. She doubled down on her surveillance, starting with Willow Creek's private Facebook group, Community Pride and Order. She ran it like a digital dictatorship, deleting any post questioning the HOA, banning residents who asked for budget transparency, and editing event recaps to erase names of those she labeled non-participatory. One neighbor jokingly commented, "Nice mulch, Karen," under a photo of her new yard lights and was blocked within minutes. Another woman posted a mild complaint about being fined for Halloween decorations in October and found herself booted with no explanation. Karen even changed the group rules to include a new clause, only constructive, HOA-approved dialogue permitted. Eli didn't confront her directly. He didn't have to. Instead, he posted a short, level-headed summary titled, "A Few Things Neighbors Might Want to Know," complete with photos of invoices, redacted transaction trails, and citations from the HOA bylaws. No accusations, no caps lock, just clean, quiet truth. The post didn't last long on the group page. Karen removed it within 15 minutes. But by then, it had already been screenshot, copied, and reposted in text chains, side groups, and group chats labeled things like Karen Watch and HOA Survivor Squad. Within hours, Eli's inbox flooded with messages. Some were cautious, "Hey, can we talk privately?" Others were angry, "She did the exact same thing to my kid's lemonade stand." More than a dozen neighbors shared stories of fines that made no sense, inspections that felt like personal vendettas, and anonymous reports that clearly came from Karen's porch camera. That weekend, signs of soft rebellion started to bloom. It began with a row of wind chimes, 8 in total, installed overnight along Maple Drive, all tuned slightly sharp and slightly loud. One had a handwritten sign beneath it, now with extra volume, "Just for Karen." A teenager chalked a massive drawing on the sidewalk in front of her own house, depicting a castle made of HOA violation slips and a tiny figure on top holding a glittering clipboard. Someone else started circulating a meme-style poster titled "The HOA Inquisition," featuring a badly photoshopped image of Karen in medieval robes, seated on a throne made of mailbox citations. The artwork went mini viral in the neighborhood, even getting taped to the side of the community mailbox twice. Karen predictably escalated. She issued a new set of violation warnings, citing excessive sound, unapproved artistic displays, and malicious satire. The language was increasingly dramatic. One letter referred to the chalk drawing as a visual assault on collective decorum. Instead of silencing the residents, it made things worse. Caleb rigged a small LED sign to blink in soft neon above his garage. Scroll, a simple message, "Now playing Karen the Musical," starring nobody. When asked about it during her next HOA email blast, Karen replied, "There is no musical. There is only misconduct." Eli watched all of it unfold from his porch, a glass of iced tea in hand and the HOA bylaws on his lap. This wasn't just a neighborhood losing patience, it was a regime slowly unraveling under the weight of its own absurdity. The trick now was not to gloat or poke the bear. The trick was to keep gathering proof, to let Karen dig her own moat while thinking she was building a wall. And based on the freshly posted flyer Karen taped to the community clubhouse that read "Emergency Meeting, Neighborhood Crisis Response," it looked like the moat was about to flood. By the time Karen taped the emergency HOA meeting notice to the community clubhouse doors, it had already been screenshotted, memed, and turned into a parody event flyer by 3 different residents. One version read, "HOA Live, featuring delusion, denial, and decorative fencing." But jokes aside, the atmosphere that evening was thick with something heavier: anticipation. For the first time in years, the entire neighborhood was showing up, not to receive orders, but to watch them get questioned. Chairs were dragged into tight rows, folded arms outnumbered smiling faces. Even the treasurer, who hadn't attended a meeting since his hedge trimming citation, was sitting front and center. Karen entered like it was opening night. red blazer, clipboard tight to her chest, hair styled into its usual executive bob. She tapped the mic twice, gave a rehearsed half smile, and began, "Dear residents, Willow Creek has always been a beacon of structure and standards, but recent disruptions, misinformation, and public hostility have threatened the very foundation of our community harmony." She paused as if expecting applause. None came. She soldiered on. "That's why I called this emergency session, to reinforce the importance of order and remind everyone that without rules, there is only chaos." Eli didn't raise his hand. He simply stood. A few people shifted, whispering. Karen blinked twice, surprised by the breach of protocol. "Yes, Mr. Ramirez?" she asked, voice clipped. Eli walked to the front, set a slim folder on the podium, and said, "With respect to order, I think the neighborhood deserves full transparency on everything, including financial conduct, misuse of emergency services, and unilateral enforcement actions that were never approved by this board." A few gasps, one cough. Karen opened her mouth, but Eli kept going. He flipped open the folder and handed out copies. Flash drive data, annotated invoices, screenshots of unapproved expenditures labeled as shared resources but installed exclusively at her home. "I'm not here to argue aesthetics," he said, his tone measured. "But when over $30,000, 0 cents is spent without board votes and $911 is weaponized against a backyard barbecue, we've crossed beyond clipped grass and holiday lights. We're dealing with liability." Karen stepped forward, voice raised. "These documents are taken out of context. I acted swiftly for the benefit of our collective well-being. This isn't corruption. It's leadership." But the room wasn't buying it. One board member, whose name tag still read Greg in faded Sharpie, cleared his throat. "Karen, did you really approve landscaping work from your nephew's company without a vote?" Karen turned crimson. "It was an emergency safety upgrade. There were raccoon concerns." "Raccoons?" someone muttered in disbelief. Another neighbor whispered, "That jacuzzi was for the raccoons?" The chuckle spread like wildfire, and just like that, her authority cracked. Karen began shouting over the noise, scolding the room like children. "You don't understand what it takes to maintain order. I've protected this place." Board member 4, a soft-spoken woman named Darlene, stood up and quietly said, "We didn't ask you to protect it. We asked you to represent it." The room went quiet again. The HOA vice chair stepped forward, voice calm. "Given recent findings, I motion for a vote of temporary suspension pending financial review." No hesitation. Hands went up. 5 out of 7 board members voted in favor. Karen froze, eyes scanning the room for support, but even her longtime ally on the board stared firmly at the floor. The clipboard slipped from her fingers. Karen was officially suspended. An internal audit would begin that week. As the crowd began to murmur and scatter, someone near the back shouted, "So, is karaoke night back on?" And half the room laughed, because for the first time in years, it felt like Willow Creek could finally breathe. But Eli wasn't smiling yet. He knew Karen wasn't the type to go down without a sequel. Karen didn't speak to anyone after the vote. She left the clubhouse with the stiff gait of someone trying to outrun humiliation without breaking into a sprint. The next morning, her front lawn bore a new addition, a large, professionally printed sign that read "Motivated Seller" in bold red font, posted like a declaration of surrender. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same woman who once fined a neighbor for unauthorized on a yard sale poster was now screaming desperation in 72-point Helvetica bold. The city's investigation began promptly. An official in khaki slacks and mirrored sunglasses knocked on doors, interviewed residents, and requested financial records that Karen had previously insisted were sensitive internal documents. Gerald, the treasurer, didn't hesitate to hand them over this time. In fact, he delivered them in a reusable grocery bag labeled Karma's Filing Cabinet. Over the course of a week, the audit confirmed most of what Eli and his small alliance had suspected: misuse of HOA funds, falsified voting logs, and a charming line item called Community Morale Consulting, which turned out to be a reimbursement for Karen's spa trip to Sedona. The tension that had strangled Willow Creek for years seemed to evaporate overnight. A neighbor named Trevor organized a block-wide barbecue titled Reclaim the Block, held fittingly in Eli's backyard. Attendance was full, the food was loud, and for the first time, the HOA didn't issue a single warning about noise, unapproved decorations, or suspicious grilling behavior. Kids darted between folding chairs. Dads compared marinades. Someone set up karaoke, and halfway through a delightfully off-key rendition of Sweet Caroline, even Gerald picked up a tambourine. No one mentioned Karen. They didn't need to. Meanwhile, the HOA board began its quiet transformation. Paige volunteered to lead a subcommittee on regulation reform, and Caleb helped write new policy drafts that emphasized transparency and community input. The old ridiculous codes, like chime shall not exceed 12 decibels and yard art must reflect seasonal themes, approved by the board, were struck down. In their place came clauses about privacy rights, due process, and protections against abuse of power. The bylaws, once weaponized into petty threats, were being rewritten into something sane, something human. Karen's moving truck arrived early on a Tuesday, backed into her driveway like a silent apology. She didn't wave, she didn't shout, she didn't even glare. She simply packed her things with the help of 2 exhausted movers and disappeared before noon, but not before a curious detail appeared on Eli's porch. A small white bakery box and a folded note tucked neatly beneath it. Inside were 6 lemon bars, topped with powdered sugar and guilt. The note read, "I know I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. Thank you for speaking when the rest of us couldn't." It was signed simply, Linda House 14, Karen's former best friend. Eli didn't say anything to Dana about the note. He just opened the box, bit into a lemon bar, and said, "Still needs more sugar." That night, as he carried the trash bin to the curb, Eli noticed something odd sticking out of the community mailbox. A rolled-up flyer printed on pale pink paper. He pulled it free and read the title, Karen Wilkins Legal Defense Fund, because HOA heroes deserve justice too. He stared at it, blinked once, then said aloud to no one, "Oh, for the love of and turned on his heel. Tomorrow he'd print something of his own. The pink flyer didn't last long. By sunrise, most copies had vanished, some discreetly removed by residents, others creatively repurposed. One was taped inside the dog park gate with "Do not feed the Karens" scrawled over it in Sharpie. Another had been folded into a paper airplane and launched from a second-story balcony during a community cleanup. By noon, the only legal defense fund Karen had left was a growing folder of HOA violations that she herself had authored. It was poetic, predictable, and finally done. A week later, the neighborhood held another gathering. No permits, no approvals, no official oversight, just people. It wasn't billed as anything grand. Someone called it the Unmeeting. Others referred to it as Chillapalooza. But it didn't matter what name stuck. Folding chairs lined the sidewalk. Dogs roamed off leash like furry diplomats. Kids painted the sidewalk with chalk suns and crooked houses. Someone brought a giant tub of lemonade. Dana brought her famous deviled eggs. Paige set up a small community input table with sticky notes and a question. What should Willow Creek be next? Eli watched it all from the shade of his porch, a glass of iced tea in hand and Buddy asleep at his feet, tail twitching against the grass. At the heart of the event stood a newly unveiled sign, freshly hung on the clubhouse wall. It read in bold wooden letters, "Willow Creek, no drama, just dogs." Beneath it, someone had pinned a laminated printout of the HOA's new code of conduct. One page, 12 bullet points, simple language, and a hand-drawn doodle of a smiling sun. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. As people passed by the sign, some stopped to pose for photos. Others just nodded and smiled like they'd rediscovered a part of themselves they hadn't realized had gone missing. Midway through the afternoon, Eli was handed a box wrapped in recycled HOA newsletters. He peeled back the paper to find a small shadow box containing 3 items: a miniature plastic badge, a wind chime made of old soda tabs, and a T-shirt folded neatly beneath them. The shirt had a meme-style print of Karen mid-rant, mouth open, with the caption, "Flaw Alarm Queen," laughing. Eli just shook his head and said, "I'm framing that." Later, Marlene, the new interim board president, a retired kindergarten teacher, known for cat sweaters and blueberry scones, approached him with a clipboard of her own. "We'd love for you to take a more official role," she said, her tone hopeful. "The ethics committee, maybe? Or conflict resolution training?" Eli smiled politely, took a long sip of tea, and replied, "I think I've met my HOA quota for this lifetime." Marlene chuckled. Okay. But maybe just one workshop on how not to trigger a neighborhood-wide rebellion?" Eli nodded. "That I can do, as long as it does involve fines for wind chime." As the sun dipped low over Willow Creek, paper lanterns glowed softly across porches. Conversations hummed, dogs barked lazily, and music floated gently from a Bluetooth speaker playing something nostalgic and unapproved. There were no speeches, no clipboards, just people laughing, remembering how to be neighbors again. The street was alive, not with surveillance, but with something better: ease. As Eli stood to stretch, Dana nudged him gently and whispered, "Check the mailbox." Inside was a small unmarked envelope with no return address. Inside, a single note: "This isn't over. Justice will be restored." It wasn't signed, but the letter K was stamped at the bottom in smudged red ink. Eli chuckled, held the note up to the fading light, and muttered, "Karen's last stand? Oh, honey, you picked the wrong neighborhood again." Sometimes the loudest clipboard in the room doesn't mean leadership. It just means no one's pushed back yet. Eli didn't fight Karen with more noise. He fought her with proof, with patience, and with people finally willing to speak up. That's the real takeaway. Communities aren't built on rules. They're built on relationships. When fear leaves the mailbox, something better takes its place: laughter, lawn chairs, and yes, even slightly too loud wind chimes. Beyond that, so here's a reminder: neighbor to neighbor, stand up when it matters, speak up when it's hard, and maybe don't give absolute power to anyone who owns a label maker. If this story hit home or hit your HOA, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a laugh, and don't forget to hit like. We've got more Karen collapses and clever comebacks coming your way, because justice tastes better with lemonade and a side of deviled eggs.